I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes talking about e-commerce. And particularly, I'm going to talk about why I think e-commerce is fundamentally, at its core, different to physical retail, why cross-channel makes everything more complicated. And I'm going to start with a definition of complexity. And this is with respect to a very interesting book called The Checklist Manifesto, where Atul describes three types of things in the world: the simple, the complicated, and the complex. Simple things are like baking a cake. Complicated things are like sending a rocket to the moon. And complex things, and he gives lots of examples, are like building a house or performing an operation, where each individual step is simple, but the end result is complex. My contention, quite simply, is that e-commerce is complex. And when I talk to great retailers, even not so great retailers, they tell me that whilst retail is detail, retail at its core is very simple. And why is it simple? Because the first thing is you make money on a store-by-store basis. You can look at each individual store and is it making money, is it not making money? Once you have a format that works, growing a retail business is simply about opening more stores in more locations. And a business like Zara has opened, on average, a store a day for the last 4 years. It may be a hard strategy to execute, but it's a very, very simple strategy to conceive. You can understand what's going on in two simple ways. If you have 100 stores and you look at your store like-for-likes, if all of your stores are up 5% except for one, you don't need a PhD to say there's a problem in that store. When it comes to stock, you can look at your stock, and typically in retail, you've either got too much of something or not enough of it. So you can look at relatively simple outcomes in physical retail and make good and certainly good enough decisions. And generally, I would say that problems, whilst are quite easy to identify in physical retail, but often they can be quite hard to fix. Online, it's completely the other way around. Online is this one amorphous mass of data. It defies simple decomposition. There's no easy way of looking at an online business. You can look at it by marketing channel, by customer segment, by geography, by keyword, by category. But each one gives you a slightly different view of the world. You make money in the online world on an order-by-order basis. You grow through customer acquisition and customer retention, a very, very different growth trajectory. And you can't walk the store in the same way. Sure, you can go to a website and you can click around, but that's a completely different experience to an Ian Cheshire walking into a store and knowing instinctively within seconds whether it's good or bad. And for me, online, the real challenge is that often the problems are very, very hard to spot. But when you do find them, they're often much easier to fix because of the nature of the technology. I'm going to go through these points one by one. Firstly, activities. In the online world and in the multi-channel, cross-channel world, for me, there are these 4 big blocks of activities. Marketing activities, about channels, Google, customer acquisition, retention, promotional activity. A website, driving people through the store funnel. Product activities around range, price, availability, and content. And operational activities, processing orders, customer service, fulfillment. And the problem is that all of these are interconnected. I was talking to someone from Barnes & Noble who had a real problem. They were getting a lot of new customers and weren't converting them into second customers. And they spent millions of dollars, months, staring at their CRM and analyzing their CRM database. It turned out there'd be nothing to do with that. The issue was delivery on promise. As Amazon does, they were telling people you'll get your book in 2 days, and it was turning up in 4 days. They were simply looking in the wrong place. At Fig Leaves, where I was their CEO for 7 years, I spent months of my life staring at web analytics, believing that the answer to understanding our conversion rate lay in web analytics. And it was only after we hired someone from Amazon who opened my eyes to how to really think about this that actually we realized what was driving the volatility of conversion at Fig Leaves was nothing to do with the website. It was to do with availability, product availability. And again, something that just typically isn't tracked in web analytics was really the cause of our site conversion issues. And then a third example, an electronics brand I was talking to recently, having huge problems getting economics of Google to work. Spending a huge amount of time sitting with their paid search agency, sitting with Google. Again, the issue was nothing to do with that. It was a retail pricing issue. Yeah, if your prices aren't competitive, keywords won't convert. So the real challenge for me is this stuff is very, very interconnected, and each individual piece is simple. The resulting whole is complex. The second is that making money is simply a new paradigm. If you look at the P&L of an online business in the same way as you look at the P&L of a store, you'll just make the wrong decisions. Because for me, the P&L of an e-commerce business is understanding at its core this trade-off of profit per order and volume of orders. You know, a lot of retail CEOs will say to me, you know, Michael, what is a good online conversion rate? To which I typically say, it's just a bad question. You know, I see very profitable online retailers with a 1% conversion rate. I see very unprofitable online retailers with a 5% conversion rate. And the reason it's a bad question is because all of these measures are interconnected. If you run, for example, a free delivery above £50 promotion, your conversion rate goes up, your average order value will typically go up, your delivery revenue will go down. And the question is that a good or a bad thing to do? Not, what does it do to my conversion rate? This also gets much more complicated in the multi-channel, in the cross-channel world. And I think Ian Cheshire, you know, is a good example. Any businesses will actually take very little revenue online, but clearly there's a huge cross-channel effect. And for me, the two bits in a sort of slightly different shade are the key. It's moving from a profit per order to a customer lifetime value, and moving from an online profit per order to a sort of a multi-channel or cross-channel influence profit per order. I think this is absolutely fundamental. You know, we were talking to Macy's in the US, and Macy's understand that when they click on, they're bidding on a generic keyword like furniture, if you look at the online economics of that, you would stop bidding in a nanosecond. But actually, they understand that for every person who clicks and maybe buys online, because they track customers through their store card multi-channel, they have complete visibility of the online economics. And then it bifurcates. You have people who understand the economics who are saying, we understand this, we start bidding up on generics online, and people who don't understand the economics who are switching those off. So for me, understanding this is going to be one of the great challenges, and it's clearly not easy, but as Ian Cheshire said, you have to move to a sort of a customer-centric view of profitability. Not doing so is simply leaving customers for your competitors. The next challenge is trading. And again, in physical retail, you know, life is simple. You've either got too much of something or not enough. You know what you've got and you know what you've sold. In the online world, you know, you've got just an order of magnitude more information. And what this analysis is, this is something I spend a lot of my life doing, which is you take, for a retailer, you know, all of their products, this is for a retailer, all of their products, and you rank them by profitability. And then this is a cumulative plot where you can see that this retailer, you know, 10 or 15% of their products are making more than 100% of their profit. And I'll come on to why it's more than 100%. The first thing is that you can distinguish, for products that aren't selling, you can distinguish between products that aren't being viewed and products that are viewed but aren't being sold. It sounds obvious, but the number of buyers that I work with who struggle to engage with web analytics and want to feel that their instinct is better than actually saying, you know what, the reason you haven't sold this is because no one's actually looked at it. And for this retailer, when we ran this, it was amazing. They were sitting on about £4 million of stock, and 30% of it had not been viewed in the last month. I mean, it was a real interesting sort of wake-up call of a very different way of trading the business. The thing at the end is then interesting is that, you know, in the physical world, whether someone comes into your store or whether 10 people come into your store, actually there's no marginal cost. But in the online world, visits have a cost. Whether you're paying Google, whether you're paying affiliates, whether you're paying media owners, the marginal cost of a visit is not zero. And consequently, it's very easy to spend money driving people to products where you make a marginal loss on the product. Again, I think this is very, very important to think about the world in a different way. Growth is also a different paradigm. As I said, in the online world, growth is driven by customer acquisition and retention. Most online businesses stop growing. And the reason they stop growing is that the churn rate, the attrition of their customer base, is greater than the number of new customers they're acquiring. If you don't understand the behavior of your customer base, you will wake up one day and growth will be a distant memory. And again, my belief, I spend a lot of time doing, is thinking about what is the optimal growth rate for a retailer? How do you take all this data and understand, should you be growing at 10%, 20%, 30%, or 100%? And finally, how does one navigate all of this? Well, I'm a big student of Amazon, and every year, Jeff Bezos writes a letter to his shareholders. This is an extract, it's in the public domain, this is an extract from his letter of last year. And I think it's absolutely fascinating. He says that we care about making money, but we focus our energy on controllable inputs. As I said at the beginning, in physical retail, you can look at simple outcomes, product sell-through, like-for-likes, and make very, very good business decisions. You can't do that online. The data is too complex, it's too interrelated. What are these controllable inputs? Maybe we'll talk about on the panel, but Amazon last year had 452. 452 inputs that they were measuring that drive the customer experience and ultimately drive long-term value. And I think this, for me, in summary, is the key challenge. Understanding what drives profit and then understanding the new data to measure the things that actually drive real action. Thank you.